I'm Jeff Brennan from various places, Australian National University. You said, I think this is a direct quote, tax reform is rarely popular even if the economic argument is strong. And I think there are two ways of reading that quote. One is as a rhetorical challenge, right? It's to say the economists have to do a better job of selling the conceptual framework on which efficiency gains are calculated. The other is, as I see it, a kind of conceptual challenge, and it has two sorts of strands. One is the question as to whether some attempt to systematically and formally model the political constraints is an important element in any proper policy exercise and in tax reform specifically. And the second is a kind of question about whether the extent to which efficiency is in the eye of the beholder. So the question of a distinction, as it were, between what we might call technical efficiency and, for want of a better term, existential efficiency. Efficiency as it's perceived by the general public and what the authority of those views of the general public ought to be. So it's a normative.
Yeah.
So it does seem to me this is a really very central issue, and in a way, in often informal tax reform exercises, it comes, as it were, peripherally rather than centrally. And I'd like to hear more from you. You're centrally placed in.
Yeah. This was that was a loaded sentence in the speech, and I'd like to write a longer paper on this.
You'd like to see it?
It's something that I've thought a lot about over the years, in part because I started out thinking that I was going to be a tax academic, and I wrote my PhD in a tax policy area, and then when I decided that I was going to go into the public service to get involved in tax policy reform as if you like, a policy practitioner rather than as an economic researcher. So I made that transition very early in my career, and when I made it, I thought, this is not... Well, I didn't see it as a one-way path. Of course, as most of you would know, once you jump out of academia, it's rather difficult to confront going back in. I mean, you take a few years out, and it's rather difficult. So there's a personal journey element to this as well. And yet, throughout my career in offering tax policy advice, I have always found that I have wanted to ground the advice in theory. I've wanted to be sure that the policy advice paid a great deal of attention to the sound theoretical underpinnings, that in offering policy advice I was being more policy principled inspired than pragmatic. So that's been very important to me personally. I have also, over the last 25 years, and this goes to an earlier question, found myself quite frustrated by the role that economists have played in tax policy debates. One characterisation of it is some have demonstrated indifference in tax policy debates that I at least have seen as being incredibly important from the perspective of the contribution that the proposed reforms could make to the well-being of Australians. And that demonstrated indifference on the part of the largely academic community I have found frustrating from time to time. On some occasions, it's not a demonstrated indifference that I've observed, but rather something which is a great strength of the academic economics community, which is the intense debate that goes on. That is to say that whenever an idea is ventured publicly by a person, whether that person is an academic economist or whether it's a policy advisor or whether it's a government minister, there's at least a handful of academic economists who will contest it. There's a great strength of economics as a discipline. It's one of the things that, as a young person, I found very attractive about the study of economics, this contest of ideas, that we are so loath to come to a consensus position as a profession, so loath to come to a consensus position on anything. In fact, I think there's a sense in which we feel that we're not being true to economics as a discipline if we do find a consensus position on anything. It's a great strength. But for people who are in the business of offering policy advice, and for governments, and I've seen it on both sides of politics, this is not a partisan comment at all, but for governments, government ministers who are seeking to get ideas legislated, that is unbelievably frustrating, incredibly frustrating. I think there are occasions on which economists might, at least for a period, put down their weapons and join a consensus on an idea. And I don't think that putting down of weapons for a period would do irreparable damage to the academic economics profession. We have a recent example of this. I'm not going to make any comment about the RSPT. CPRS, the emissions trading scheme that was proposed in Australia. Even that idea, which most academic economists would have accepted, I'm sure, at least behind closed doors, was a sound policy idea. There were no end of academic economists who wanted to say, it's not bad, but I've got a better one, you know. And in the way in which political debate occurs, such a statement does enormous damage to the chances of sensible reform. To say an emissions trading scheme isn't a bad idea, but a carbon tax would actually be better, for example, doesn't increase at all the chances of a carbon tax being legislated. All it does is reduce the chances of an emissions trading scheme being legislated. So there are times when I think it would certainly serve the national interest if we economists, particularly academic economists, could just call a halt to the war for a while.